Now let's learn about Germany. So Teckla, was Germany fascist or materialistic during World War II?
Great question. Germany was a fascist country during World War II.
Who led Germany in World War II, and what were some facts about him?
Adolf Hitler led Germany in World War II. He was born April 20th, 1889, and died April 30th. He spent most of his childhood in Linz, Austria. His final education was secondary school. He wanted to study art but decided to go into the military. He served in the German military during World War II, where he got many awards and became German Chancellor in 1933.
That's very interesting. What did he do after leaving the military?
After the military, Hitler became a military politician in Munich. Hitler then joined the German Workers' Party and slowly gained control of it. The party later became the Nazis. He gained more and more support and was appointed German Chancellor. Once in power, he established absolute control of the dictatorship.
So if Hitler eventually had a lot of power, who helped him gain so much control?
That's a great question. Ernst Röhm played a big role in Hitler's rise to power. Rome recruited the strong armed squads, which Hitler would order to protect the party's meetings, attack communists and socialists, and use violence as a way to appear strong. Later, later on, these squads became a private party army. Although Hitler later had Rome and his lieutenant killed after Rome wanted a radical revolution in Germany.
What did Hitler do once in power?
Once Hitler was in power, he got rid of any democratic institutions and prepared Germany to attempt to conquer Europe. His troops then invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939. Throughout the war, the Nazis rounded up and killed 11 million people that were believed to be life unworthy of life. These people included Slavs, Jews, homosexuals, and Jehovah's Witnesses.
That's so sad. What else did he do during his dictatorship?
During his dictatorship, Hitler took away the freedom of individuals. For example, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, and freedom of assembly. Officials were allowed to read civilians' mail, listen in on phone calls, and search homes without a warrant. Additionally, he dissolved all other political parties besides the Nazi Party.
Who were some important German military leaders during World War II?
One military leader was Wilhelm Tell, who was chief of Wehrmacht High Command. Another leader was Hermann Göring, who was commander-in-chief of Luftwaffe.
So, Nikki, what was some of Germany's military strategy to try and win the war?
Thanks for asking. Germany's main military strategy was Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, which emphasized speed and surprise. Germany's Blitzkrieg gave them multiple victories during the beginning of World War II. Tanks, artillery, along with the German air forces were needed in order for Blitzkrieg to succeed.
What was the German Air Force?
The Lafayette was considered the most effective air force during the start of World War II. The Lafayette's advantages were having more advanced tech, along with how effective their tactical doctrine was.
Thanks for all that great info, Nikki. Now, Teckla, how did the Nazis use propaganda to influence people?
The Nazis used media to influence the public perception of the Jewish and other subjects such as the military. The film The Eternal Jew was an example of movies being used by the Nazis to further spread ideas that Jewish people were below human. Newspapers during World War II, such as Der Stürmer, included anti-Semitic cartoons and the caricatures of the Jewish people. They set up the Jewish to be enemies of Germany. Who led Japan in World War II, and what are some facts about him, Nikki?
Emperor Hirohito was in control of Japan during World War II. His father has previously ruled Japan, and now the throne was passed down to Hirohito. In 1929, he married Princess Nagatoko Kuni. He is also considered Japan's longest ruling monarch. Historians have debated over how much Hirohito was involved in World War II. However, it is clear that he still monitored the invasion of China. He oversaw the crimes committed against the Chinese people.
What tactics did he use to keep his control over the Japanese military?
For context, the Japanese military followed the values of the samurai code called the Bushido Code. These codes greatly emphasized the traits of honor, respect, loyalty, justice, courage, consistency, honesty, and mercy. One of the samurai's jobs was to protect the emperor at all costs. If a samurai were to lose to their opponent, depending on if they saw their enemy as honorable or not, the samurai would let them behead them with their sword.
So,
The Bushido Code greatly influenced many battle tactics during World War II, such as the Banzai Charge and the Kamikaze Pilots. In both of these tactics, they were usually Japan's last attempt to gain the upper hand, which often led to the soldier's death. Banzai, for example, the Japanese soldiers would often call Teno Hekai Banzai while charging.
so then, what tactics did he use to keep control over the Japanese people?
Younger generations were taught that they were better than the other nations, which was based on the belief of Kokutai. When there was a single nation chosen by a higher being of authority, students were also made to write in mandatory diaries, and their teachers would check their entries periodically to make sure that they were being successfully indoctrinated. Children also contributed to raising morale in the soldiers by sending comfort letters and drawings. American music, overall all forms of media, were banned from Japan, such as the words mama and papa.
How did Emperor Hirohito use propaganda?
Hirohito would use a specific type of propaganda. These posters would usually be in black and white with color strategically placed in specific areas. These posters would encourage citizens to preserve their resources, along with messages to boost one's pride for Japan. These posters would be placed around public transportation, school gates, and phone poles.
Were there any military leaders who were important in Japan?
The two most important leaders were Hideki Tojo, who controlled the ground fleet, and Isoroku Yamamoto, who was in charge of the Japanese naval fleet. It was Shironko Hata who controlled the ground forces during the invasion of China and the rest of East Asia. Tojo and Yamamoto were the two who participated in the attack of Pearl Harbor. However, Yamamoto was the one responsible for planning the attack on Pearl Harbor. So, Teckla, who led Italy in World War II, and what were some facts about him?
Benito Mussolini was responsible for leading Italy into joining the Axis powers. However, an event that occurred during World War I caused them to drift away from the Allies. Italy was promised a portion of land in Austria-Hungary if they joined forces with the Allies. When the war ended, Italy was only given a portion of the promised land, which upset the Italian people. Italy was also in economic unrest due to the money they spent on fighting in World War I.
How did Mussolini start fascism?
After being fired from one newspaper and leaving another socialist one, Mussolini started his own newspaper after leaving the Socialist Party in 1914. After fighting in the war, he started the Fascist Party in March 1919. He gained support from unemployed war veterans who he trained to become the Black Shirts. The Fascist Party was later invited to join the coalition in 1921.
So, how did Mussolini rise to power then?
Since Italy was already in unrest, Mussolini took advantage of Italy's fragile state to gain power. He created the Italian Fascist Party, a group called the Black Shirts who participated in rallying against socialists, despite Mussolini previously being a socialist himself. During the Black Shirts' march on Rome, Mussolini managed to snag himself the position of prime minister.
That's very interesting. So, how did Mussolini take over Rome?
He threatened to take over Rome through violence and dispatched troops there. While King Victor Emmanuel was slowly releasing troops, Mussolini had taken control of local governments. Thousands of armed fascists marched through Rome. Emmanuel refused to pass martial law and asked Mussolini to form a new government as he dissolved the original one. So, Ofelia, what were the goals of the Axis leaders?
Glad you asked, Teckla. In total, they all had basically the same goals, with one of those being territorial expansion, meaning they all wanted to expand their influence through military annexation and conquest. The Axis powers also focused on establishing new world orders under respective control, and our leaders envisioned a world dominated by their ideologies and economic systems, with Italy's fascist regime and Japan's Greater East Asia prosperity sphere, and Germany's Third Reich, which they would implement harshly. Although the Axis leaders had different viewpoints, they did believe in breaking Western hegemony because they saw them responsible for all that was wrong with the world, and they also believed in anti-communism, viewing the Soviet Union as enemy number one to their ideologies and goals. This is in fact a main reason why the Axis became allies.
So, what were the individual goals of Germany?
Great question. For Germany, they wanted living space in Eastern Europe and a dominant position in Europe. eliminating their enemies, and to implement their racial ideologies. They also wanted to stop the spread of communism and break the power of Western democracies.
How about Japan?
For Japan, because they were under the power of militant nationalists, they wanted to establish a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere and take control of the eastern part of Asia. They also wanted to control their resources, like, for example, their markets, leaving East Asia in need of food, leaving them weak.
And finally, what about Italy?
Italy wanted to create a new Roman Empire through expanding into North Africa and the Mediterranean and the Balkans. They wanted to expand their religion and Italian influence, and they tried to achieve a strategy called a parallel war, while also focusing on expanding Italian territory and influence.
Thanks, Ofelia.
Thank you for watching!